The Fantasy Football Tips Podcast with Mills, JP, Quigliarno, and Cliff.
Hi, you're listening to the Fantasy Football Edge podcast. My name is Mills. It is game week 24, and this week I'm joined, I'm very pleased to say, by JP. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening. I'm great, and I'm delighted to be on air tonight.
I'm delighted to have you on air. We're sort of doing a bit of a tag team at the moment, aren't we, between yourself and Quigliarno? And Quigliarno did take a couple of swipes at you last week in terms of your whereabouts. I think he did it in podcast extra time, so not everyone would have heard it. But I mean, how's life for JP? Where have you been, JP?
I've been a very busy man. I've always, promised to return as much as I can, but very, very busy, work-related situation, as I'm sure many of our listeners can sympathise with.
I mean, Luke Arnold, one of our regular listeners, did say on Twitter, he got straight to the point, and
okay.
he just came out with, "Is JP still courting?" I mean, he may not have been related to the podcast. He might have just been interested. I don't know. So,
wow.
You don't need to answer that question, but I just thought it was nice that Luke was taking such an interest in your love life. So
yeah, like that. It's nice to hear from you, Luke. Nice to hear from you.
It is good to have you back, though, JP. I do always miss your dulcet tones. So, in fact, we had a bit more correspondence, and this time it was from Sushant, and again it was on Twitter. And he asked, he was a little bit belated. I think he got in just ahead of just sort of too late for the last week's podcast. And he was asking, what did you guys do for your holidays? He said he spent his at Redwood National Park.
Wow,
so
I'm jealous.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
Bonus point for JP if you can tell me what state that's in the US.
Redwood. This is going to sound stupid probably. I'm going to go with Ohio.
It's actually California.
Oh, way off.
So.
Took a guess.
Good guess. So yeah, he was there. He sent us a little picture of himself, stood under a massive tree. Looked really, really interesting, really, really good. So where did you spend your holidays, JP?
Well, I was predominantly with the family. A nice quiet one, which was very nice. Got waited on hand and foot.
Surely that's standard for a man of your stature.
Absolutely. And then had a very nice social event with a selection of managers.
You did indeed, didn't you? Yes.
It was very fun.
We haven't actually talked about that, have we, since?
We haven't,
yeah,
no.
Was,
No, well, I don't know if you can remember much of it, to be honest.
I don't know what you're trying to say, JP. Yeah, it was quite
listeners
nice.
Do.
Yeah, quite a nice social event. Okay, right, we'll move on from the general ramblings of two inane men, and we'll start talking about Fantasy Premier League, as that's why everyone is here and listening, I'm guessing. And I suppose the big news coming out today is that Theo Walcott has signed for Everton. He's passed his medical and he's been unveiled as their latest signing. I think £20 million they've spent on him, which isn't bad, is it, for a 28-year-old England
absolutely.
international? But from a Fantasy Premier League point of view, what are your thoughts there, JP?
Well, I think he's a great option. I think it's a great move for Everton. It's a very reasonable price for Theo Walcott in the current market. He's obviously, he's likely to start week in, week out. He's going to be one of their sort of star players. And I think he's under Big Sam. I think that will suit him as well. English manager to an English player. I think he's a nice side tip. I think he's a good option this week. So yeah. Yeah,
potentially may have been featuring there. 7.1 million from a FPL point of view. It's a bit of a bargain, isn't it, really? I mean, It wasn't that long ago when Theo Walcott was playing regularly for Arsenal, and he was in a lot of teams.
Absolutely, and it's quite an easy fixture, isn't it? The first one at home against West Brom is a nice looking fixture, so it's a good opportunity for him to hit the ground running there.
And I suppose it also brings into play some of the other Everton players then as well, because he's obviously going to bring something to the team that they probably haven't got at the moment with that pace. Like I'm just thinking, you sort of Rooney and Tosun, the new signing. I think it's good all round, and Sigurdsson as well. So there's plenty of options there. And that kind of the next thing I wanted to talk about, we sort of brought this feature in last week, and I quite liked it, and it kind of went down quite well. Was looking at the top transfers in and the top transfers out for the game week so far. Top transfer in so far this week, Arnautovic at West Ham. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been tipping him for a few weeks now. I will say, I did have him in my team last week. I did wild card last week, and I had him in already anyway for that double game week, and obviously kept him in for last week. And everyone's putting him in this week. Obviously, he was the top point scorer last week, I think with 16 points, which
16,
was a pretty good return. Thoughts there? Is that form likely to continue, do you think? I mean, you were a big advocate, I think, of David Moyes at West Ham, and he seems to have got the most out of Arnautovic. Is that a good signing, do you think, for people right now?
Absolutely. He's a great signing. He's a player. He's quite a confidence player, and he's a very when he gets into a streak, he stays in it for a decent amount of time. I remember him at Stoke. There was last season. He had a phase of about 8 or 9 games where he couldn't stop scoring, and I think he's going to sort of keep that going for at least 4 or 5 more games. They're going to focus their team around him, aren't they? You know, he's a quality player. They've not got the best squad in the world, and he's going to be sort of their main man. And I think someone like Arnautovic responds to that very well. They like being the sort of centre of attention. So I think it's going to suit him, and obviously a fairly easy fixture in Bournemouth at home to get goals in. So yeah, I think he's a bit of a no-brainer. I mean, I'm not sure of his exact. Is it 7 point something million, isn't he?
Yeah, something like that. I will double check on that.
7.4, I think, but it's worth checking. I think he's 7.4, but I could be wrong. 7.7.
No,
okay.
7.
Oh wow, bang on 7.
I actually thought he was more than that. I think I picked him at 6.9 actually, but 7 million. That is an absolute bargain, isn't it?
That's a bargain.
Yeah, I mean, again, sort of looking back at Walcott, similar sort of price, but Arnautovic is in form. He's fit and he's scoring goals. And like you say, they've got a good fixture this weekend as well. So potential captain choice this week maybe as well. So
possible.
It's a good one. And then further down the line, you've got the likes of Salah. I mean, I can't believe so many people dropped Salah. And, you know, he was on fire, wasn't he, last week? Firmino, popular player. Son as well. And I think he's a bit of the unsung hero, isn't he, at Spurs at the moment? His form is unbelievable. And then Kane, as if, like, you know, lots of people have suddenly realised, oh, you know what, it's a good idea to have Harry Kane in my team. But the top transfers out, Morata, which, you know, is a no-brainer for me again. I think he's in dreadful form at the moment. But interestingly, and I find this one fascinating, and it just proves once again the fickle nature of a fancy Premier League manager, Raheem Sterling, the 5th most transferred out player so far for this game week.
Wow,
I mean,
that's interesting.
That's crazy, isn't it?
That's crazy.
He's City's top scorer.
He's not my Gary of the week, but he's a borderline captain choice this week.
Yeah, I mean, they've got Newcastle at home.
At home, yeah. That's crazy.
Absolutely. Right, JP, good to get started there. We're going to have a very quick break, and then we're going to be back with your Gary of the week.
The Fantasy Football Edge Podcast. 90% drivel, 9% ego, and 1% tips.
Okay, JP, the floor is yours this week with no Quigliano, so we're going to go straight in with your guaranteed performer this week. Who are you going to go for?
Absolutely. Well, I'm quite looking forward to it. Gary of the week is fairly obvious, I think. It's Sergio Aguero. A very poor result for Man City last week. They'll need to bounce back. What better way to do that at home to Newcastle? You know, it's an easy fixture. It's a fixture that they'll expect to turn them over, and Pep Guardiola will be looking for a reaction. I think Aguero is going to score twice minimum. I remember, was it last season or the season before, in which a certain someone in our league triple captained Aguero against Newcastle and ended up getting 5 goals. I'm not sure if he'll quite do that, but I think he's a nailed-on goal scorer.
Yeah, I do agree. I think he's going to score in this game. I find it hard to believe that he won't. The other thing that's interesting is that in the last couple of games, he's played the entire match, and I think that is probably going to continue in this game as well. For me, I think he's a pretty good Gary. I kind of liked what you said earlier, though, in the sense that, you know, you've still got your Sterlings and your KDBs. Yeah. Most people surely are going to be looking to Man City this week. I think last week the fixtures were quite tough. I think it was difficult to pick. Yeah. There weren't a lot of captain choices available. I think this week is, you know, quite a lot different. I think there's some decent captain picks this week, and I don't think it will hinge as much as it did last week on getting that right choice. I think there's going to be a few good performers this week, but I think that's as good a Gary as you're probably going to get. And the news is that Jesus is going to be back within a couple of weeks. So now really is the time to get on Aguero. If you haven't got him in your team and you want him, now is the time, because you're not going to get that guaranteed game time for much longer with him, I don't think.
No, absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
So the Xabi Alonso, where are you going with the long shot this week?
Well, I'm glad you asked. It's an interesting one, the long shot. There were a few options. I decided to go with current form, and I've gone with Callum Wilson. Obviously played very, very well against Arsenal. A very poor Arsenal, I might add, but nevertheless. Got himself a goal and an assist. He's very, very cheap. He's 5.8 million. He's probably the sort of third choice striker that you can afford. West Ham obviously played in the week against Shrewsbury, so they could be fatigued. I think it's a good opportunity for him to get on the score sheet, and I think he's a perfectly good long shot.
Do you know what? I'm almost going to say that I don't know if he's even a long shot. I think it's a brilliant shout. And I'll tell you what, it's a long shot in the sense that it was someone that's kind of gone under my radar a little bit.
Yes.
But he's started the last 4 or 5 games, and in the last 4, he scored 3 and had an assist. So that is pretty impressive form by anyone's standards. And I think, what is he, 5.8?
5.8 million.
And 3.4% ownership. That in itself points towards it being a long shot. So I do like that, and I like your point in the fact that, like you say, West Ham have got that fixture in midweek. So good shout. I like that, JP. I do like that indeed. Side tips then. That sets you up nicely for a nice set of side tips. What have you got for us?
It does. I feel full of confidence now. So thank you for that, Mills. Full of confidence. I'm going to start the ball rolling nice and early. I think Chelsea have not looked good going forward, but they've looked very good defensively. I think at this stage of the season, I think you probably do need a Chelsea defender, and I would probably lean towards an Alonso or an Azpilicueta. Yes, they're expensive, but they're getting clean sheets and they're getting assists and goals. So I'm going to start off by saying one of those two, probably an Azpilicueta or an Alonso.
They're the two that are pretty regular, aren't they? They pretty much play every single game. Christensen's probably the budget buy, but he's not necessarily in every single squad.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'm going to talk about Paul Pogba. I know we had that long injury spell, but since he's come back, I don't know about you, Millsy, but I think he's been absolutely world class. 2 assists it was against Stoke, but nevertheless, this is a player that I believe will now score points every week, or almost every week. So I think if you can get Pogba in, for example, I'm tempted to trade Pogba for David Silva. I should have got rid of David Silva a long time ago, obviously. So I think Paul Pogba, I think you could go Lingard. I think he's obviously been in fine form. He's obviously much cheaper at 6.4 million, so he's quite easy to get in your team. We've mentioned Theo Walcott. I'll include Wayne Rooney in there. Again, I think like you said, with someone like Walcott behind him, or alongside him, I think he's going to create opportunities there. I'm going to keep saying Richarlison. I say it week in, week out. He didn't score points last week, but he scored most points most weeks. So again, another good option there. Looking down the fixtures, you mentioned Arnautovic. He was going to be a side tip, but he's probably almost a bit more of a side tip these days, in fairness to him. But again, you could go with Arnautovic, or possibly even Lanzini. I've been very impressed with Lanzini of late.
Yeah, last week he was sensational, wasn't it? Although a lot of that was off the back of Arnautovic's play as well. So they played very well together.
It was. I'm quite excited by Lanzini. So he's a nice little side tip. If you're in a league where people don't have him, why not give it a little try? And then you've got your Man City players, and you've got a lot of options there. You've got Sané, Sterling, KDB. So I think, all in all, a decent selection of options. The last one I would probably mention is Jamie Vardy, playing against Watford. If we look at Watford's recent form, it's been dreadful. They've been conceding goals, and I think he's likely to get a goal at home against Watford. So that about summarises my side tips, Mills.
Okay, interesting that you left out the Spurs and Liverpool fixtures there, because you did miss them out, didn't you? I didn't just go to sleep and not hear you.
I did leave them out, and I'm going to be honest. One of the reasons I left the Liverpool game out is because I've got a steal or no deal to talk about. In that game. Okay,
that's interesting. On mine actually, it was a bit of a side tip that I added in last week, but it really was a steal or no deal with Luke Shaw. and it
Wow.
turned out to be a hell of a shout.
That is a hell of a shout, Mills.
4.9 million he was. I think he still is just about 4.9 million. And he's played the last 4 games now. And obviously last week they got a clean sheet as well, so it was a pretty good shout. But I just think, just touching on those other 2 games, Spurs away at Southampton. Southampton have kept 1 clean sheet since October. So
wow.
that is a bloodbath waiting to happen. And then Liverpool against Swansea. Swansea are going to have to be very good to keep that to 2 goals, or, you know, I can't see them conceding less than 3 goals.
No.
I just can't see it. So I think there's, you know, lots. That's what, you know, kind of what I was saying earlier. There's so many options available this week. So thank you, JP. That was a great set of side tips. And we're going to be back after this short break with Stat Attack.
Oh, good.
The Fantasy Football Edge Podcast, giving you the edge over your rivals.
Okay, JP. I love this feature, and it's turned more into a quiz question than it's a stat related quiz question. And Quigliano got it right last week. I think I asked the question who's played the most key passes in the league so far, and it was Ozil, so he got it right.
Oh wow!
Anyway, this week, a bit more tricky question: which team in the Premier League have had the fewest attempts from set piece situations this season? So which team in the league this season have had the least attempts from set piece situations? Difficult question.
Very tough question. I think if I had to guess, I would lean towards Brighton.
You're incorrect. I think it's a decent. It's a decent effort. It's a decent guess. Decent guess. It is another team actually that went up from the Championship last season. It's Huddersfield. Huddersfield have only had 10 attempts from set pieces all season. They're the Napoli of the Premier League. Napoli in Serie A have only had 5, which is just incredible, isn't it? That is incredible. So there's a little stat attack for you. So if you're pinning all your hopes on a Huddersfield player that takes a lot of set pieces, it might be worth rethinking that. Right, JP, we're going to go into podcast extra time soon. We're going to keep the podcast quite short this week. And it just sort of leaves me to mention the new league that I've set up. And I don't even think you know about this yet, actually.
I don't.
So we had a question last week from a listener that was asking to get access to my team and Quigliano's team. So it just sort of re-jogged my memory really that we hadn't actually set up a league this season. So we've set up a league. I think I set it up last Sunday, and it's got about 60 people in there so far, which is quite nice. You know, good start. So get yourself in the league. The code, if you can remember this or write it down, is 123 305-125 0838. And I really can't be bothered to say that again. So if you want to join the league, either go to fantasyfootballedge.co.uk. I'll put it up somewhere there, or just press rewind on your on your phone or whatever you're listening to this podcast on, and do it that way. Right, JP, we're going to go into podcast extra time in a second. We're going to be talking your steal or no deal, which sounds quite interesting and intriguing. And we're also going to be talking about our captain picks for this week as well. So if you want to listen to the podcast extra time, go to fantasyfootballedge.co.uk and get yourself signed up. It's going to cost you a tenner for the season. Well, for the year, actually. You'll get a full 12 months for £9.99. If not, if you're a cheapie, we will see you next week in Game Week 25. JP, I'll see you right after this.
Will do.
It's time to go deep. It's time for the podcast extra.